Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another review. Today I will be reviewing Mafia Definitive Edition. I only played the remaster of the first game. Before we get into this review, if you want to see more reviews like this, please feel free to click the like button and subscribe. Let's get on to this review. So with every remaster of a video game, one of the most important aspects of the remaster is the graphics. You can tell that the game developers really cared about this remaster, because the upgrading graphics is incredible to me. They rebuilt the game from the ground up, and that takes a lot of dedication. With this remaster, the game is available in 4K HDR, but unfortunately there is no 60 FPS on the consoles. If you're a PC owner, then lucky you get 60 FPS. The scenery in this game is just breathtaking. For a game that has no ray tracing at all, the lighting and reflections are really well done. You can see the reflections in the puddles, and the puddles are really well rendered. It makes the world more lively and seem more realistic as well. Just the way the lights reflect off of the puddles is perfect to me. I know with ray tracing this game would look much better, but without ray tracing it's still really well done. At some points I was comparing it to Red Dead Redemption 2, which you already know is a really good looking game. I've noticed a lot of games have a hard time with water effects, and with this game, I'm happy to say that they did a really good job with the water effects. They reworked all of the models for the characters, and the vehicles as well. The vehicles in this game just look beautiful and they really do look lifelike, and like the original version that they were based off of. I'm really impressed with how well the character animations are. It's very hard to get facial animations correct, and to look realistic to the human eye. I have to say that they did a really good job at animating the characters. I noticed especially for the character Don Salieri that they did a really good job with his facial animations. I even noticed towards the end of the game that you can actually see his neck strain while talking, which is really cool. Even the eyes looked realistic to me, and I know how hard that can be to animate. All I have to say is hats off to the team that worked on this, and that they really did a great job, and you can tell that they really cared about this remaster. The city looks absolutely beautiful during the day, and I decided to have a small little walk just to see the sights and sounds. I noticed that while walking, the city felt alive. Maybe not as alive as a Rockstar game, but again, really close. There are a lot of comparisons to this game in Grand Theft Auto, I know. Every once in a while, one of the pedestrians will actually say hello to you, and your character will also answer back. The traffic is lifelike, and even the pollution coming out of the smokestacks look real as well. There may not be a lot of places to enter in this game, but sometimes just the scenery and the feeling of the city being alive is enough. Believe it or not, there is a mode where you can actually turn the color off in this game. I personally think it's because if you want to play this like a mobster movie from the early 20s, you can actually make it look that way. Again, something that the developers did not need to add, but it just adds something else to the game for movie buffs. What about the overall sound design and music? Is it good enough for a remaster? Absolutely. And I have to say that the music in this game fits the storyline perfectly, and also the era it was placed in. You had the classic music of the 1930s. The only thing that I would want more of is the classic music from the 30s. I understand that there were probably copyright issues, but I would have wanted a lot more of it because to me, I have noticed that a lot of the music was repeated throughout the game. I noticed that towards the ending of the game, I was always turning off the radio because the music started to get repetitive, and that's too bad. The one thing that I would really like to point out about the radio though is the talk shows. They're not technically talk shows, but they do play a whole broadcast of a baseball game, which is really impressive to me. I also really like the little news shows that they have in this game. It makes the world feel alive when you have a broadcast about something that you have done in a mission. The news stories are really well written, and you feel like you're listening to an actual radio broadcast about something that happened in the world today.
From the news desk of WLH 570, a special report on crime in our city. It had been hoped by lawmakers and the general public alike that the end of Prohibition would cut off the mob's air supply. But 2 years since the repeal of the 18th Amendment, it seems to have merely added fuel to the conflagration of crime that engulfs the country. It would appear that removing the conditions that created a new type of virulent gangsterism is not going to remove the problem. The criminal empires that amassed such wealth and power in the last decade and a half are simply too powerful.
Besides the music, there is a lot of atmosphere within the game as well. I noticed when I went to the countryside of the map, you can hear a lot of the nature from geese to the water and little details that just add so much to the atmosphere. I actually at one point just sat there for a couple minutes and just listened to nature. I also want to mention that with the remaster of this game, they recast the entire cast for the game, and I have to say that's really impressive and shows how dedicated the people are to this game. Another important aspect of remasters are the controls. Usually the controls on older games are not the greatest and need an upgrade. So, are the controls well done? Let's answer that question first. First off, I'm really surprised with how easy it is to fire a gun at other vehicles while driving at top speed. The controls are matched perfectly for this kind of thing, and I have to say that I'm very impressed with how well they are able to implement this mechanic. It immediately locks on if you choose, and you can just shoot your gun as many times as you want to destroy the vehicle. The one thing that I would have liked though is if we could actually shoot out the tires, but for some reason we can't do that, which is disappointing to me. There is of course driving in this game, and for me the driving was really weird to me. Let me explain. The handling of the vehicles in this game is really weird to me. The driving feels really stiff, and it should be loosened up a bit more. The handling on the faster vehicles are pretty hard to control, but that does make sense for faster vehicles. The problem is that even on slower vehicles, the handling is still really bad. There are two different driving modes like regular and simulation, but to me that does not make a difference at all. If they had just made the handling less stiff, then the driving in this game would be a lot more bearable and a lot more fun to drive. This seems like something that I've been mentioning a lot lately in video game reviews, and what I'm talking about is motorcycles. Again, this game, motorcycles are really difficult to drive. I don't know what it is with open world video games, but it's the fact that none of them seem to get it right with the handling of motorcycles. There is one mission where I had to chase somebody in a motorcycle, and it was really hard dodging the crowds and stuff, and there's nothing more frustrating than accidentally hitting somebody or hitting a wall and you flying off the motorcycle and ending up failing the mission. I really hope that one day that somebody can figure out how to use motorcycles in the right way, handling wise. I know I'm making this comparison a lot in this review, but the only other game that I know of that actually did motorcycles correctly was Grand Theft Auto 5. Yes, all of that is important. But what about content? Is there enough to give you endless hours of fun? Or should there have been more? Let's find out. There are many collectibles in this game. I really like these collectibles not because they give you rewards, but because it shows the history of comic books and just regular books, and seeing these comic books and books really help you understand what life was like back then. Also, there are little newspapers and notes all over the city, and it's really neat because it adds more life to the city and adds more content to the missions themselves. Sometimes you can even find pictures that give you more context to a story, or just neat little pictures that you can find people from the past. It's always cool to see what life was like back in those times compared to now. There are also these little cards that tell you about each character within the game, and it just gives you a little bio about them. Yet another little thing that just adds more backstory to the characters that you really like, and you get to learn even more about them. I really like how this game is actually connected to the real world. The reason why I mention this is because towards the end of the game, you actually see articles about the tension in Europe right before World War II. Having real world connections like this in a video game is really cool because it makes the game feel more realistic to you. It's a nice little detail that the game developers, yet again, did not have to add, but they decided to do it, which is really cool. There's also this feature in the game called the Car Cyclopedia. What this is that you can basically choose any vehicle from the game and choose to basically rent the vehicle to see how it drives. With this, you can actually change the color of the vehicle and the interior color, and sometimes even change the variants in the vehicle. After you do this, you are put onto a racetrack and not actually into the city. After you go through the tutorial on how to drive, you can drive around the track as many times as you want. Surprisingly enough, I actually really like the idea of you being able to only use the vehicle on a racetrack and not in the city. The reason why I say this is because if you were given access to the entire city, then what would be the point in having this vehicle outside of this part of the game? It just adds another bit of exploration to this game, because if you really like the said vehicle, then you can go into the actual game and find that vehicle for yourself, so then you can drive around as much as you want in that vehicle of your choosing. Another thing that I really like about this game is that there is a free ride mode. What this is just basically an open world part of the game. This just gives you the freedom to explore the entire world without having to do any missions at all, and I really like that. In free mode, you can actually change the way your character looks. I suggest going into free mode after you finish the main storyline, because when you go into free mode, the only clothing that you can wear are the clothing that you were in for each mission of the game. I like this idea, but I have one major problem with it. My problem is that you can't mix and match the clothing in that one set outfit. There are more than 16 different outfits that I have found in this game, but you can never mix and match, which is very disappointing to me. The only other issue that I have with this is that there are different outfits you can find throughout the world. But my problem is that it automatically changes your clothing, which is a real problem. I don't mind the fact that it changes the clothing automatically. What I do mind though, is that there is only one place in the entire map where you can change your clothing. They should have either had an option to change your clothing in the options menu, or have multiple different locations where you can change your clothing. What this means is that every time you find a new pair of clothing, if you don't want to wear that pair of clothing, then you have no choice but to travel across half the map, which can take quite a while in this game, and that's just irritating. This is my favorite look out of all of them. I like it because it has the classic mobster look, and it just makes my character look more badass. Now, onto the story. So, just a disclaimer, I got this synopsis from Wikipedia. These are not my own words. Some of the words are altered to make the story make more sense. So, let's go. In 1930 Lost Heaven, financially drained taxi driver Thomas "Tommy" Angelo is forced by two members of the Salieri crime family into helping them escape an ambush by the Morello family. Although he is compensated for his help, Tommy loses his job and cab. The following day, when the Morello family targeted him in an act of revenge, asking for Don Salieri's help, Tommy gets revenge on his attackers and agrees to join Salieri's organization. Assisting with the operations of Salieri's rackets across Lost Haven, overseen by his consigliere, Frank Coletti, he befriends both Sam and Polly during the jobs they perform, while earning respect with Don Salieri. 2 years pass, and Tommy begins a relationship with the daughter of Salieri's bartender, Sarah. After protecting her from street gangsters under Salieri's order, Tommy and Polly retaliate against the gang, but Salieri later reveals that its leader, whom Polly killed, was the son of a corrupt counselor. Later, Tommy is ordered to destroy a brothel for switching his loyalties to Don Morello and kill an informant working there, discovering them to be Sarah's friend Michelle, who needed money to pay for her brother's medical care. Tommy begins questioning his actions and lets Michelle go in exchange for her silence. He later covers up his actions and assists Sam on a hit against a witness to the counselor's son's murder. In 1933, Morello begins using corrupt police officers to ambush Salieri's operations, and gains support from the counselor, who desires revenge for his son's murder. Following an ambush on a bootlegging operation, Salieri discovers that Frank has been supplying information on his money laundering activities to the authorities, and orders Tommy to kill him. Discovering he was forced to do so for his family's safety, Tommy allows Frank and his family to leave the country and covers up his actions, before retrieving the evidence against Salieri. Later, Tommy marries Sarah and starts a family with her. In 1935, with Prohibition ending, both Mafia families begin moving into their new rackets. Upon learning that Salieri is making moves to gain control over law enforcement, Morello attempts to assassinate him. Surviving the hit with Tommy's help, Salieri retaliates by declaring open war on his rivals. To weaken Morello's position, the Salieri family targets his operations, with Tommy assassinating the counselor to reduce Morello's control on law enforcement and city politics, and Morello's brother, Sergio, to reduce his control on the port unions. The war eventually concludes when Tommy, Sam, and Polly assassinate Morello himself after chasing him into the countryside. By 1938, the Salieri family took full control of the city's rackets, neutralizing anyone who attempted to stop them. When Tommy agrees to recover a shipment of impounded cigars, he quickly becomes let down with Salieri's path upon finding out that he is also smuggling diamonds and drugs, having previously vowed to never get involved with drugs. Against Sam's advice, Tommy convinces Polly to go ahead with a bank robbery he had been planning. Although the job is a success, Tommy finds Polly shot dead in his apartment the following day and the stolen money missing. Upon meeting with Sam to discuss the matter, he quickly learns that Salieri ordered him to kill both men for going behind his back, and that Michelle and Frank were killed by Salieri's men after Tommy's past cover-ups were exposed. Surviving the attempt on his life, Tommy kills Sam, but is forced to go into hiding. With his former allies against him, he later contacts Detective Norman for help. After relaying his story, Tommy offers to testify against the Salieri family in exchange for protection for his family. Norman agrees to the request, and the resulting investigation and mob trials lead to most of the Salieri family, including Don Salieri, being convicted and sentenced. After serving an 8-year sentence, Tommy is reunited with his family, all of whom are placed under witness protection and relocated to Empire Bay. Tommy lives a peaceful life with his family until 1951, when two men approach and fatally shoot him on Salieri's behalf. The game ends with a monologue narrated by Tommy, lamenting over how he and his friends wanted the good life but ended up with nothing at all, and concluding that it is most important to keep balance in everything. So, what are my thoughts on the story? Well, I personally thought that the story was pretty well written, and it felt a lot like a real movie. The one issue that I have with the story is the very beginning. The very beginning moved very fast for me, and it was hard for me to get into the story because it moved so fast. I myself would not see that happening where you would be in trouble with some people and then the mob just helps you and you're suddenly in. To me, that makes no sense. Only a day after Tommy is saved by the mobsters, he is able to meet the family's boss. That seems like a wild jump because, from what I remember in different movies and stuff, you slowly go up the ranks, then you meet the mob boss. It would have been better if we did not meet the Don until halfway through the game. My reasoning for this is that it gives us more suspense as to who we are working for. My other issue with this idea is that how did they not know that my character was just gonna go in and shoot the Don right there? That seems like a very reckless move, especially for an organized crime family like this. The end of the game was very well done, and the twist that came up was very well done as well. Besides the beginning being way too fast, and then accepting Tommy into the ranks so quick, the game was actually really well done story-wise. With this story out of the way, let's get to the meat and potatoes, the gameplay. Let's talk about police chases first. Whenever you are in a police chase, there are roadblocks that you can go through. It's basically road work, and you are given an indicator on the minimap when you are in a police chase, and when you go through these obstacles, they can temporarily slow down the police. I only really used these in the beginning because the mission told me to do it, but otherwise I never really used those roadblocks ever. The melee can be very difficult at the beginning of the game. When you have to dodge the enemy character from hitting you with a bat or something, you have to hit the Y or the triangle button to time the counterattack perfectly. Even on easy, this can be quite the challenge at first, but once you get the hang of it, it can actually get better. Like Grand Theft Auto 5, there is a way to avoid the police when you do something illegal. There is a mini-map, and the police are highlighted in blue, and when they are searching for you, you must stay away from their eyesight. Using this mini-map can be a very useful way of avoiding the police when they are searching for you. The one thing that I wish they did have though, was that you could see their line of sight, so then it could be easier to figure out whether they're going to be able to see you or not. I really like the fact that in this game you do have to follow certain rules and laws. What I mean by this is that you have to follow road laws. So this means that you have to follow a speed limit, not crash into anybody, and if you do any of that, you will actually be pulled over by the police, which is a really cool thing. A thing to help you with speeding is that you can put a limiter on your speedometer. This means if you put the limiter on, you can travel at the speed that is designated for that certain area. I know for some people, that probably could be a frustrating mechanic, but to me it actually adds realism to the game, and I'm a sucker for realism. The combat with weapons is pretty good in this game, but not perfect. I will admit that I had aim assist on for the entire game. I tried to do this without aim assist, and it was pretty hard to aim the weapons and get a clear shot on the enemy. You can't really target any parts of the body besides the torso, which is fine for me. The amount of times you have to shoot somebody was pretty realistic as well for this game, and I'm very impressed by that. The only issue that I have is that all the weapons feel the same to me. The only gun that really feels different to me is the long rifle. It's a pretty powerful weapon, and usually kills people with one shot, and can be really helpful in those situations where there is an enemy far away and you can't exactly get a good shot on them, but that's pretty much it. My second favorite gun was the Tommy gun, just because it looks cool and that's a classic weapon for the Mafia. Otherwise, I never really used it. The only reason why I used it was because it had rapid fire, but honestly it did not feel unique otherwise. I barely used the shotguns because I never had the use for them. Most of the shootouts in this game, if not all, were all ranged, so I never really had the use for close combat weapons, like the shotgun or any other melee weapons. The only time you would get into melee combat was when you were forced into it. Overall, there was no real close quarters combat in this game. That's very disappointing to me. I know it's more of a realistic game and close quarters combat isn't the most realistic thing in the world, but this is a video game. Close quarters combat would have added more excitement to the gameplay, but unfortunately there just isn't any close quarter combat. So having weapons like knives, baseball bats, and shotguns never really did anything because you never really needed them. Otherwise, the weapons were really well done. They looked good, they sounded good, and for the most part, they handled really well. Sometimes, but not often, you can actually use stealth. I'm not the kind of guy to really use stealth in video games, but I thought I would try for this mission, and it kind of works, but it kind of didn't at the same time. Surprisingly enough, the stealth does work really well, but there is one key thing that is not within this game that would have helped a lot. What I'm talking about is radar. What I mean by radar is that in some games like Grand Theft Auto, on the minimap, they show little radar screens in front of the enemy, players or characters. This signifies where the NPC is looking, and it will help you a lot with avoiding detection. I feel like all games should have this feature, especially if it's open world, so then if you have the option to use stealth, you can use it very reliably. If the game expects you to be stealth in certain missions, you need to be able to see where the other NPCs are looking. There are only 2 notable missions that do this, but it still would have added a nice touch. I know that there are little indicators on the screen when you are about to be seen, but it's way more obvious to use the radar because that is way easier to see. Also, there are little blips that are shown in the actual map itself, so you can see where the enemy is, and there's like a little triangular shape where they are looking. To me, it doesn't seem like it's enough. There is a weapons depot where your base of operations is. In here, you have all the weapons that you can possibly use in this game. You have melee weapons like knives and baseball bats, and guns like a pistol, revolver, long rifle, Tommy gun, and shotgun. And that's pretty much it for guns. You also have a place to get all of your ammo from, which can be very helpful when you need ammo. There are throwable items, but not very many of them. You only have a grenade and a Molotov cocktail. I myself never found a use for the throwable items, but it is nice to have the option. You can actually pick locks in this game. Maybe not as sophisticated as Fallout 4, but you can still pick locks on doors, but only car doors. I've noticed with my experience with this feature in the game is that every time I have done it, I've not been caught. So I think that means that this is a clean way of stealing a car without the police being on your ass. Okay, so let's talk about the AI. The police in this game are very sophisticated. I did some testing and the police response time and overall artificial intelligence is really well done. Almost on par with Grand Theft Auto. Yes, I know I keep on talking about that game. The police are very smart because they'll set up blockades, and when you try to pass the blockade on, like, the right, they will back up into you and try to stop you, and not a lot of games do that. I also like the fact that if you have like 1 star, and will show up as a ticket on the bottom right, and if you stop you can actually get a ticket from the police. Also, if you make a minor mistake on the road, on the hard difficulty, like running a red light, hitting a pedestrian, or parked car, or you're caught speeding, they will actually pull you over and arrest you if you resist. I find that really impressive. Nothing will ever rise up to the level of Grand Theft Auto levels of AI, but this gets really close. Another smart thing about NPCs is the fact that if you are in the middle of the road and you stop in front of them, they will honk a few times and they will even yell at you. After about 5 to 10 seconds, they will actually back up and move around you. Again, just another little detail that adds more realism to the gameplay. I do find it weird how when you fire at a vehicle, they will actually stop and get out of the vehicle and then just start running. That's one minor thing that I have noticed that was weird, because who in real life would get out of their vehicle and then run away when being shot at? Wouldn't it be easier to just run away in the vehicle? It's a minor thing, but it's something to note. There are a few things that I want to mention that either I did or did not enjoy. I only have a few key things to talk about, or this video would be way longer. This isn't specific to this game, but it is specific to a lot of other games. I absolutely hate it when they ask you to sign into their club or sign into an account just to play the game. Why do I need to log into your servers to play a game that has no multiplayer? I hate that stuff with a passion, and it should never be put in a video game. Another thing that bothers me is the fact that you cannot go into certain places that you were able to go to in the missions. For instance, you can't go into either Polly's house or Tommy's house in free mode. I find an issue with this because I can't understand why we can't enter those places that we were able to enter during the story. What frustrates me even more about this is the fact that you can actually see inside of Tommy's house. This means that the inside of this house is fully rendered in, so the only thing that is in the way is the locked door. It just frustrates me that in this open world, there are so many inaccessible places that were accessible earlier, and I just cannot understand why we are not able to enter those places, especially if we can see inside and it's fully rendered. The other annoying thing about this is that there are still collectibles in these places. So I'm trying to think of how am I supposed to get these collectibles if we can't even get into those places. It just does not make sense to me. But with all of that said, I would like to say that this game was incredibly well done. The main bulk of this game is the story and the way the game looks. The story was very well done, and it felt like a real movie about the Mafia. I'm glad that they didn't make this story out to be that you were a cop or anything, and I'm very happy that you were able to actually play as a person in the Mafia. In this game, there's betrayal, romance, and even a little bit of comedy. Story-wise, this game has everything, and I have to say that it was a really well written and thought out story. I can't speak for the people who played the original game, but I do have to say through my research that this game is a significant upgrade from the original. The animations were perfect to me, and the world just looks amazing. If you were thinking of getting this game, then I would highly suggest that. If not for the story, this game probably wouldn't be great, but with everything together like the story, graphics, and overall feel for the city, I would say that this is definitely worth a buy. Thank you to everyone who decided to watch this entire video. This video is a lot longer than I usually have my videos, but I just like the game so much that I want to add that extra amount of content. Anyways, this is GR Games, and see you in the next video.